You know that feeling when you find an old coat at the back of the wardrobe, one you haven't worn in years, and you put your hand in the pocket and there's a tenner in there? And for about 4 seconds you feel like you've won something, like life has rewarded you for simply existing. That is a genuinely good feeling. Now, imagine the opposite of that. Imagine finding out that the money you'd been carefully setting aside, money you'd been quite proud of actually, money you'd not touched, money you'd been vaguely responsible about, had in real terms been quietly worth less every single year. Not because you spent it, not because anything dramatic happened, just because you left it sitting in an account doing nothing, while the cost of everything around it slowly crept up. That is inflation, and it is the most boring way to lose money that has ever existed. I was probably 30 before anyone explained this to me properly, and when they did, I just sat there nodding slowly like I'd already known, because I didn't want to admit that I was a grown adult who'd been treating a savings account like a trophy. Well done, John. You saved it. Into the cupboard it goes. Brilliant. Right, so this is the one I wish someone had sat me down for when I was about 19, in my first proper job, spending most of my wages on going out and a leather jacket I wore approximately 4 times. This is the conversation about money. Not about getting rich, not about stock tips or crypto or any of that. Just the basic, boring, genuinely important stuff that nobody explains clearly because it doesn't make for a very exciting television program. It starts with a question, and the question is this: what is money actually for? Because I think when you're young, money feels like it's for now, for this weekend, for the thing you want, which is completely understandable because when you're 22 and your rent is paid and there's money in your account, the future is this sort of abstract, foggy thing that doesn't feel urgent. Retirement feels like something that happens to other people. Older people, people who own sensible shoes and have opinions about loft insulation. And then one day you are the person with opinions about loft insulation, and you look back and think, where did the time go? And also, why did I spend £300 on that leather jacket? The thing is, and this took me an embarrassingly long time to properly understand, money isn't just for buying things. At a certain point, money buys something much more valuable than things. It buys options. It buys the ability to say no to the job that's making you miserable. It buys the ability to take a month off when something goes wrong with your health, or your family, or just your general sense of who you are. It buys a version of the future where you're not doing the maths at the petrol station every single time. That is what investing is actually about. Not getting rich, not beating the market, just slowly, quietly, boringly, building a version of the future where you have a bit more breathing room. And the mechanism that makes it work is genuinely one of the most interesting things I've ever learned, despite the fact that it sounds like something your geography teacher would use to pad out a lesson. It's called compound growth, which means, very simply, that the returns you make on your money also start making returns. The interest earns interest, the growth grows, and over a long enough period of time, the numbers do something that feels almost like cheating. I'll give you the example that actually landed for me when I first heard it. Imagine you put away £100 a month from the age of 25. Just £100. Into something sensible. We'll get to what sensible looks like in a minute. By the time you're 65, assuming a fairly average return, you'd have somewhere in the region of £300,000. Now, start that same habit at 35 instead. Same amount, same everything. Just 10 years later, you'd end up with roughly half that. Same money, same discipline, 10 years difference, half the result. That is the bit that genuinely keeps me up at night. Not because I'm trying to scare anyone, but because I started properly late. And I sit there sometimes, working out what those 10 years would have meant, and I think, I bought a lot of nights out in a leather jacket, which was fun, but still. The actual villain of this whole story isn't poor investment choices or market crashes. It's waiting. Waiting until you know more, waiting until you earn more, waiting until things feel more settled. waiting until Monday, essentially. I have been incredibly good at waiting. And look, I understand it. When money is tight, the idea of putting any of it away feels almost offensive. Like, yes, brilliant. I'll invest the 40 quid I've got left after the car insurance. Very helpful. And I'm not going to stand here and tell anyone they should be doing something they genuinely cannot do. That's not the conversation. The conversation is, when you can, even slightly, even imperfectly, start. Because imperfect and early beats perfect and delayed every single time. Which brings me to the inflation thing. Because I think this is the part people don't feel in their gut until it's too late. Inflation is the quiet one. It doesn't make headlines. It doesn't crash dramatically. It just nibbles. Every year, just a little bit. The same loaf of bread that cost you £1 costs £1.05, then £1.12. Then it costs something that makes you do a small involuntary wince at the self-checkout. And your money, sitting peacefully in a standard savings account earning 1% interest, is losing ground in real terms every single year. So it's not even about growing your money. At a basic level, it's about not silently losing it, which sounds grim, but actually it's quite motivating once it sinks in. Now, what does sensible actually look like? Because this is where people tend to either glaze over or suddenly develop extremely strong opinions about a specific tech company. Neither is particularly useful. The thing that has worked historically for ordinary people who are not professional investors and do not want to spend their evenings reading financial reports is quite simple. Index funds, a pension, regular contributions, automation. That is more or less it. An index fund, in case nobody's explained it, is basically a way of buying a tiny slice of a huge number of companies at once, rather than trying to pick which individual company is going to do well. The idea is that you're betting on the general direction of human economic activity, rather than trying to be clever about which specific bit of it is going to win. And the reason this matters is that most people, including professional fund managers, people who do this for an actual living, do not consistently beat the market over the long term. Most of them. So the strategy of picking winners, which feels exciting and clever, tends to produce worse results than just buying everything and sitting quietly, which feels boring but turns out to be correct. I found this information both reassuring and slightly annoying. The pension is the other thing, and I know, the word pension makes people's eyes go slightly out of focus. It sounds like something that belongs to a different era, something your granddad had from working 40 years at the same factory. But the reason it matters, especially if you're employed and your employer contributes to it, is that it is free money. Your employer puts money in, the government gives you tax relief. It is the closest thing to actually free money that the financial world contains, and an alarming number of people are not taking full advantage of it, because they haven't thought about it since the day they signed their contract. I was one of those people. For longer than I am comfortable admitting, I had this vague sense that the pension existed, that something was happening with it, that it was probably fine. It was not nothing, but it was also not as much as it should have been. The automation piece is the final bit, and in some ways it's the most important bit psychologically, because the problem with investing is that it requires you, repeatedly, over many years, to make the boring choice instead of the fun choice. And humans are not naturally good at that. We are good at buying things we can see and touch and wear 4 times. We are less good at consistently redirecting money towards future John, who is a somewhat abstract figure and doesn't send thank you cards. So the solution is to make it automatic. The money leaves the account before you've really registered that it arrived. You never see it, you never spend it, and over time it is quietly doing the only thing that actually matters, which is being there and growing while you get on with your life. Standing at a cash point on a Saturday night counting out 20s, that version of me had no idea that the most powerful financial move available to him involved doing almost nothing on purpose. Just setting something up and then leaving it alone, like a slow cooker, which is perhaps the least exciting analogy for wealth building ever offered, but it is completely accurate. Here is the bit I think about when I look at my boys. They're young now, Everything is still possible for them in the particular way it is when you're small, and the future is just a bright, shapeless thing. And I know I can't protect them from everything. Life has its own plans, but the one thing I can do, or try to do, is make sure they understand this stuff early. Not in a way that makes money feel scary or complicated, or like something only serious people with spreadsheets get to understand. Just the basics. The boring, reliable, genuinely important basics. Start early if you can. Put something away regularly. Don't try to be clever. Let time do the heavy lifting. Keep your costs low. Don't panic when the markets have a bad year, because they will have a bad year. And then they will have a better one. And that is just how it works. And understand that the goal was never to be rich. The goal was to be free. Or at least freer. Freer to make choices that aren't purely about money. Freer to walk away from things that aren't working. Freer to take the scenic route occasionally without it being irresponsible. That is what future you is building towards. Not a yacht, just options. And the strange part, the part I genuinely wasn't prepared for, is how much calmer life feels once there is something there. Even something modest. Even something that is nowhere near where you'd like it to be. Just knowing it exists. Knowing something is slowly accumulating in the background while you're buying shopping and worrying about the boiler and eating toast over the sink at 6:30 in the morning. There is a quiet, undramatic comfort to it. Which is exactly the feeling the leather jacket was supposed to give me, and didn't. If any of this landed, even slightly, if any part of it made you think, right, I should probably actually look at this, then just start there. Not with a perfect plan, not when everything is sorted, just look at it. Log into the pension you haven't thought about since you started. Have a look at what's in there. Ask your employer what they'll match. Search index fund if you've never done it. Spend 20 minutes on it this week. Not forever, just 20 minutes. That is how it starts. That is how everything that actually helps you starts. Not dramatically, not with a revelation in a car park, just quietly on a Tuesday when you decide to do the boring thing instead of leaving it until later. I still have the leather jacket somewhere, back of the wardrobe. Won't fit anymore, but it's there, which is more than I can say for what I spent on it.